Alright, in this video I'll be showing you how you can upload a file in your React application and have it automatically uploaded to your S3 bucket. So if you have a page over here and you want to upload a file, here I'm going to upload an image. I'm going to click submit, and before I click submit, let's just check our bucket. Currently it's empty. If I click on submit and check the bucket, we should see that the file is being uploaded over here. So that seems rather simple, but there's actually a lot of configuration that goes on behind the scenes, and it took me a really long while to get it working. For this video, I wanted to really show how to actually find the resources and how to actually understand what the resources are saying, because I think a lot of the things aren't really explained. And so I hope that this will save at least some of you some time in trying to figure out how you can upload your files to Amazon S3. And so I hope this video will be helpful for you. If you find it useful, do like and share it, and do consider subscribing for more of such videos. Alright, now let's get started. Before we begin, I'll just say that I'll be doing this pretty much from scratch because I feel that it's quite important to see the full process, especially for a beginner. And so if you've already set up your upload component in your application, then you can actually just skip to the part where I go through the AWS configurations. But if not, first let's just do an npm start and see what we have. So essentially we have just a title and a meta in a React helmet. So that's basically just an empty project like this, and we want to add in a upload component. So to do this, I'm not going to use just a simple input. Instead, I'm going to use a library that's React upload dropzone or dropzone upload. And the reason for this is just that they have some boilerplate code, and I think it's also helpful to try out a different library from time to time. So I'm just going to click on this, their official web page. And you can see the installation is quite simple, just npm install. So open up a new terminal here and copy and paste. And meanwhile, you can actually look at a quick start, but you can look at live examples. So let's pick one. Let's go for a single file auto submit. So here they have the code that you can just copy and paste into your component. So I'm just going to create a new component. Let's just call this our uploader.js. And now over here, I'm just going to create a template. So uploader, and copy this single file auto submit. So let's just copy this. If I can grab hold of this, and let's actually just paste this here. So let's just call this the uploader. And so I can get rid of this, and the bottom over here I can delete this as well, and looks good. And we want to render this component inside app.js. So I'm just gonna, below the helmet, I'm just gonna have an uploader, and let's just have it like this. And remember to import this, so import the uploader from components, save, and let's just check falls outside the source directory. Alright, so I should create this inside of the source. So move it here and update imports, save. So it should be dropzone is not defined, so you have to also import this. If you look at a quick start, you should import dropzone from, or rather you should import this. So let's import this as well, save, and now if I refresh, dropzone is not defined. Import this inside the uploader, so back again to uploader, and paste this here. Alright, so now we have the component, and let's not worry about the styling for now, but basically what's important is we are allowing one file and on change status. So when we upload a file, then this function here will be called, and currently we'll just do a toast, but I think we can actually edit this. So let's just get rid of the toast here and get upload params. We can actually delete this for now, and let's just check if we upload this. Let's just console log the status and the meta. So I can remove get upload params. So drop a file, and I can open up the inspector if I make this a bit larger. On a Mac, I can do Option Command I. So if I drop a file, let me drop a JPEG. If I have a JPEG, so a file here, you see that it says preparing, and we have done. So the status is preparing here, and the status is done over here. So we know that the uploader component is working well. Let's just close this for now. And so the next step now would be to create a bucket in S3. So I have opened up the console over here, and I can click on S3. I can search here S3, and let's go ahead and create a bucket. So wait for this to load and create a bucket. Let's call this image, and I'm just going to add a project name here for my project. And let's just unblock all public access. So let's allow this so that we can access the bucket and create the bucket. And there we have our bucket image. Where is it? Over here. And now the next thing to do is to go into permissions, and then you want to go scroll down, and what's important here is we need to add our configurations for the CORS. So CORS is basically cross-origin resource sharing, which allows you to access your bucket from someone else. So let's say your React application. And so there is no default, there's no template here. So the way you might figure this out is to just go into Google and search for, let's say, AWS S3 file upload from JavaScript website, and we want to use a pre-signed URL. So let's see. None of these are actually useful. Anything from the blog of AWS. And okay, now there we have it. So on their blog, they have this web page here. And if you were to look at the other examples, the other search results, at least for me, what I found was that these were not very helpful. So generating a pre-signed URL for get object, it's a bit difficult to see how these will actually fit into your application. So in the end, what I actually used was the first option here, which is found on their blog. And so here's a quick summary about how this whole thing is going to work. So essentially, typically in a server-based environment, you have application users that upload your file to the application server, and then there might be some processing in a temporary space over here. Then once done, the application will transfer the file to a database. So it is simple, but the key thing here is that there are significant side effects on the performance of the web server, especially on busy applications. And so you can actually read through for more details, but by directly uploading to S3, you can avoid proxying these requests through your application server and reduce network traffic and server CPU usage. And so basically it's faster and more effective. So here's how the big picture looks like. You have users that will make a request to Amazon API Gateway. So you make a GET request, and then you will run this Lambda function, which will return you a signed URL. And using this signed URL, the users will then make a put request. So over here, we'll make a put request to the Amazon S3 bucket. And once that's successful, you will see the file being uploaded to the S3 bucket. So for getting the signed URL, first you make a GET request, and from the Lambda function, you make an S3 request to the S3 bucket that you want to upload to. The S3 bucket will return you a signed URL, and that's passed all the way back to the user, who will then use this signed URL to upload to the S3 bucket. So here is basically what I just said. And so here is actually the code where you can actually find more useful resources if you go over here, but we're not actually going to use this example. So I'm going to use my own example, but if you look at the GitHub page, you can see we have the front end for the front end code and the get signed URL, which is where you will have your Lambda function. So we'll use this later, but for now, let's just go through the rest of it. So after that, once we have set up the Lambda function, we'll test the application, and basically you can test it using Postman. If you don't have Postman, I can show you the steps to install Postman, and let's take a look at this later again. But basically that's a rough overview. Back to where we were at. So initially we were trying to do this CORS setup. So if I edit here, what we need is course configuration written in JSON. If I go back to this tutorial over here, somewhere they explain it. So understanding the S3 uploading process, here you have this part where they say you must configure S3, so our S3 bucket for course. And course rules are defined as an XML document, and you can use this Yamo. So I'm not sure why this is in Yamo, because over here we expect JSON. So to convert this into JSON, let's just do a Yamo to JSON and just use one of these tools. And I've already done this before, but if I replace this and copy to clipboard, I can go back here and paste it. Notice if you press save changes, it will say that course must be written in valid JSON, because this is not in valid JSON. It expects it to be an array, so what we get out of the box isn't ready to go. So if I convert this to an array, you will see that it still actually doesn't work. So the reason for this is because we only need the course rules, and the course rules are already in an array. So all we need is actually just this portion over here for the course rules, and everything else we can get rid of. So I'm just gonna delete this and paste in this, and if I click save, this does not work. Actually all we need is this over here. So if I am looking at this correctly, I would need, so match the brackets correctly, you'll get this, cut this and then delete the rest, paste it back in. If I click save and cross my fingers, yes, this works. So if I scroll back down, we have the cross origin resource sharing configurations here. So we're allowing get, put and hit. So this will do for now. The next step will be to create your Lambda function that you actually want to call. Let's just open up a new tab and let me get rid of, okay fine. Let's just go into Lambda, and now I want to do this in Node.js. Create a function and say that, let's get image presign image URL, and let's go with Node.js, and default execution role, let's just leave it as this first, and let's create a function. And for the code that you actually want to put in your Lambda function, back to the GitHub repo, we have it in get sign URL app.js, and so I can actually just copy this and we'll make some changes to this. So let's go back here, and in your index.js you can copy, not say copy, we can select and remove everything, paste what we had, and let's just delete this. And over here, let's just make the edits that we need to customize it to our project. So the URL expiration seconds just tells you how long the signed URL that you receive is going to last for. So 300 seconds is about 5 minutes. So what's going to happen is that here's your main Lambda entry point. You get an upload URL. So this is your pre-signed upload URL. And what's going to happen is that currently it's going to generate a random ID. And this random ID.jpg is going to be the file name that you're going to upload to your S3 bucket. If let's say you only want to upload with the same name all the time, then you can change this to a fixed word. But in this case, let's go with the random ID, and then here, the bucket that we're going to use is process.env.uploadBucket. So this is telling you that you need to create an environment variable. But I think what we can actually do is we can actually just create a variable. Let's just say const upload bucket. And let's just call this the bucket name that we have created previously. So image, this is what I called it. If you want to call it something else, that's fine as well. Then over here, what we can do, we can just put the upload bucket here. So it's my preference, and expires. If you prefer a longer duration, then feel free to change this over here. And content type, let's keep it at JPEG. And this is important, and we'll see why later. And let's delete this. Here we're just console logging, and we're going to get the signed URL. So it will be a put object with your S3 params, which are defined here. And then we return the upload URL with the key. And this key here is the same key as this, and it's also the same key as this. So it's just the random ID.jpg. And so if everything has gone well, let's go ahead and test this. and see, let's just go with the template. Let's test. Let's go with test. Create a test and test it. We see that we have 200, so that's successful. And the body hello from Lambda. Let's go back here and see. So what we wanted was the upload URL, but we don't have that yet because we haven't set up the permissions correctly. So under configuration, if you look under your role name, so this is by default already created for you. If you open this up in the IAM, so IAM is basically where you can actually set all your permissions and your policies for which AWS services can access which other services, or basically which permissions they have. So here we have a policy name, and it doesn't have any other access besides this basic execution role. But right now we need to give it access to S3 because that's how it's going to get the pre-signed URL. If you remember from the tutorial here, you need, from the Lambda, you need to access the bucket. So in order to do this, to make this work, we need to grant this role access. So over here in the IAM, we can attach a policy. In this case, I'm just going to go with S3 full access because this is just a demo. But if you are using this in a real application or in a production environment, then I would suggest you actually grant the least privileged access. To do this, AWS actually has a video about this on YouTube, which is a bit weird because it's not linked to this tutorial over here. But if we search for AWS S3 upload file JavaScript, let's see, we have, so it's this video over here by AWS a year ago, and if you click on the video, this guy actually goes through what are the exact permissions that you need and so on. So I'll link this video in the description if you want to grant more specific privileges. But if not, for now, we can actually just grant S3 full access, attach the policy. Now that we have access, we should be able to get the pre-signed URL. So let's go back to the code, and now let's test this. Oh no, this is actually, I did not save my changes. I think that's why. I see. So can I go back? I did not save the changes. So you have to remember, okay, besides setting these permissions, let's just go back here and copy this. And let me just skip all the changes we have done so far. So it's another thing to take note when you are writing your Lambda function. So again, just a recap, we can keep all this, and over here we can have a upload bucket variable, and let's define that below. Let's define it here, and because I know my bucket name is image waved lib, and okay, that's a bucket name. Let's get rid of this. And alright, save and deploy those changes. And now I test it. And now it works. We get an upload URL. So I can expand this and let's just see. So this whole chunk over here is the pre-signed URL that S3 gives you. This will be the URL that your user will make a put request to, and that's going to upload their file. And this key here is just the name of the file that you'll see uploaded to your S3 bucket. So this works, right? And we can see that here the content type is image/JPEG and expires in 300 just as we set it in index.js. Alright, so I've saved everything. And in fact, you can actually test this in Postman as well. So let me just open up Postman. So in Postman here, let's just go ahead and create something new. And we will be creating a HTTP request. But currently we don't have the request URL because we have not set up an API endpoint. So back here, what we need to do is to set up a HTTP endpoint, which we can call in Postman or in your React application eventually. So to do that, we'll add a trigger, select a trigger from API Gateway, and I only know this from looking at this over here where they said we need to make a request to Amazon API Gateway. So this request we're going to allow, which will allow us to access this Lambda function from, let's say, Postman or your React application. So back here, let's create an API, a HTTP API, So these are other APIs I've created, so I'm going to create a HTTP API, and for security, let's just leave it at that. Allow cross-origin resource sharing, and here you can just choose open if you're just doing an experiment or just a simple prototype. So I'll add this, and we should see that we have now set up API gateway as a trigger. Here are the details. If you open it up, you can see the endpoint that we need to call is this URL over here. Copy this, and now I can test this out in Postman as well. So as we mentioned before, we need to make a GET request to this URL. If I click send, we should see here we have the upload URL. So things are working great. This is the upload URL. If you copy this and make a put request to this, then you should see this file being uploaded to AWS S3. So to do that, I'm going to first of all copy this, or let me just select this. Copy this and open a new tab here and make a put request this time, because we're going to put something into our S3 bucket. So let's keep all of this, and in the body we want to upload a file, so we have to say binary. We can now select a file. Let's go with a JPEG, and let's go with ASCII1. And you can ignore this warning over here, but just click send, and we should see that check your key and signing method. So this is actually quite a common error, so let's just double check. If I go back and look at the code, we have image JPEG. Let's see what else. That's correct. And under configuration, we should have course set to yes, and okay. So again here, if you make a request, we should see this URL, then make a put request to this URL. So let me just create a new request. Don't save. Let's make a put request here, and in the body I want to upload a file. Let me upload a file here, send, and hopefully this time we see no response. That's a good sign. If I go back into image here and under objects, refresh, cross our fingers, we should see here we have the file here. And if you actually open this up, you can download it and view it. Alright, so we've got it working on Lambda, and we've got it working in our Postman over here. Now the next step will be to actually implement this in our React application. So if you were to watch the tutorial or go through this blog over here, you see that that's actually where they stop. So after testing the URL on Postman, they will just transit to the front-end application. And if you open up their GitHub page and look at the front end, in the index.html, they have this chunk of code here that you have to decipher if you want to do the same thing as them in your application. So it's a Vue application, but basically what's important here is that we would need the upload image. This is what's important here. First, you make a GET request to the URL or the API endpoint, which is what we've been doing so far, the first step. And from there, you will get the response. And the next important part is over here, where you make a put request to the upload URL from the response. And the only way you know there's upload URL is because in your code here, we have defined in index.js, we have said we will return the upload URL, which is the upload URL. So back here, that's how we know response.upload URL, and you put the body, so basically the file they uploaded, and console log the result, which should be a success if everything goes well. So let's try and do the same thing. So over here in our uploader, we can add in an on file submit. So this, or rather on submit. So on submit, we have, let's call this function handle submit, and we'll define it here, handle submit, and let's just say that when we submit this, we want to make a GET request followed by a PUT request. So I can just say let's GET request. This is for the pre-signed URL, and then below we'll make a PUT request, upload the file to S3. And here what we actually take in as a parameter when you call the handle submit function is you get the files, and this is a array. So, and we can also just make this an async function. So here we want to get, in this case I only have one file, so I'm just going to say const file or const f for file equals to files, the first of the files, which is the only file, and then here we can actually just console log that file. So that's what's going to happen when you click on the submit button. If we check up here, if you click on submit, let's just check if everything is working well. Let's make this like that. So let's just click submit, and we'll see that this is what we have previously, the console logging of the status and the meta. Now we are console logging the f, or the first file that we have. So we get this object here, we get the file, and you notice that if you look closely, we actually have a file and a file object here. So what we actually want to upload ultimately is this file object here. So currently what I'm console logging is the f. So in order to get the file object, we need to actually add in file files. So get the file attribute of the f object. This is quite a tricky part that got me stuck for quite a while, but take note that if you observe carefully, we have a file object here, and that's why we need f and access the files attribute. And then the next step would then be to get the pre-signed URL. So here we can make a axios request, and let's just go back here and see how they did it. So first of all, we can add in the API endpoint, and besides that, a few other things to set up. We will need to make const response here. So basically, let's just copy this first, paste it here, and then we can define our API endpoint. So API endpoint that was defined over back in our, not here, sorry, let me find it over here. Under your API gateway, we have this API endpoint, copy it, set it up over here, save, and let's see. Okay, so we have the API endpoint set up. We'll make a GET request to it, and here, let's just go back here. We can console log the response, and let's see what we get. In fact, what we're actually concerned with is the response upload URL. So if you want, you can actually console log this as well. But for now, let's just look at the response. And yeah, let's see. So before we call the submit function again, let's also remember we need to install Axios, because we're using Axios over here. So if you were to forget this and you just click submit, you get Axios is not defined. So let's just go React.js install Axios, can type, and let's just go with this Axios. Where's the installation? npm install Axios, install it, and if I'm not wrong, you will also need to add in const Axios. So define it over here, save. Now if I go back to the application and click submit, we get a response. So JS16 console.f files has there's no files, so I think it should be file. Let me try again. So save and submit this. So the attribute is file, so single file, not files. Save this, and by the way, the response here, so response colon corresponds to this response colon. We get the response here, and if you inspect it, you can see we have the data returned to you, which is the key, so the file name that you're going to use, as well as the upload URL. So this is the pre-signed URL that you're going to make a put request to in the next step. So let's go ahead and continue on. So here we're going to make another put request, or we're going to make a put request, and this time let's take a look here. We have a request, copy this, paste it. So this blob data originally here is based on this chunk over here, but what I'm going to do is the file. So I'm just going to put f and get the file attribute. So you can define f as files 0 and file, but let's just stick with this for now, just to be clear. So we make a put request to upload this file, and once we're done, we're going to console log the response. So save it, and that should be all. So over here, so let me check the S3 bucket first of all. We cross this out, and let me just delete this current object first, so we can be sure that we upload it correctly. Or alternatively, you can look at the last modified date. So let me just delete this. Permanently delete. Close this, and now back here, if I click on submit, we have a 44 not found, so 26. Put response.upload. That should be working. Oh right, okay, so they're not found because we forgot to add in. So one important thing to take note is that I don't think it was mentioned here. It wasn't mentioned here, but you need to have a header. One of the headers is the content type. So under the method here, let me add in the headers. So you can define your headers for your request. Content type. So this is the content type that has to be exactly like that. And it's gonna be the content type that we're gonna upload. So it's gonna be image/JPEG. And this, if I add a comma here, has to match what you define in your Lambda function here. So in your code, if you have set it to be image/JPEG, then here you have to likewise put image/JPEG. If you put it as image/star, you're gonna get a forgery error. So let's just keep it the same, JPEG over here and JPEG over here. And now save this. If I drop a file again, let me go here and go back to the inspector console and submit this. 25 undefined 26. So let me check if I'm doing this right. Result equals await response.upload URL. Alright, so back in the response we have response data, and then inside the data we have the upload URL. So it's gonna be response.data.upload URL. So I'm also not sure why this is not correct, but now this should work. Let me try and submit this now. Great, so we get the response back. So that's what we get here, result. And we get the result. So this is a 200 status, so that's okay. Let's check our S3 bucket, refresh here. We should see that we have the file over here, and you can download this as per normal over here. Alright, so that's basically the gist of it, and there's a whole lot of configuration that's going on, and I found that one of the key points that you need to take note of is the methods that you use. So when are you going to use the get request, when you're going to use the put request, and also a quick recap of the resources that I've been using so far. So but this blog post here, which is quite difficult to find if you're just Googling. So this blog post here was quite useful in understanding the overall big picture. So this diagram I found really useful, but this is only going to work for this particular GitHub project. And if you're not using Vue, or you're not doing image uploads, then this might not work the best for you. So you do need to make quite a number of changes, as I've been doing so far. But besides that, the Postman part works well. And this is the GitHub page. And if you don't have Postman installed, you can actually go to postman.com and install it if, let's say, you're using download probably. So yeah, you can figure out here, you can download the app. Here I'm using Mac, so I will download for Mac. But if not, you can actually still use the inbuilt Lambda testing function over here. So the rest of it is alright. And there was also the YouTube video by Amazon Web Services, which is not linked to the blog post, but it also shows you the steps that you need to take. Although the actual code and the configurations aren't all spelled out for you, so you need to go and either go to the GitHub repo or follow the steps that I've been showing so far. So that's it for this video. I hope it's not been too confusing, building everything from scratch and explaining all the steps and making some mistakes along the way, but that's just to show how complicated things can get with AWS. So hopefully this has been helpful. If you find this video useful, do like, share it, and let me know in the comments if you find a better way of doing this, because frankly, I find it very tedious. So if there's any way that you can simplify this, please let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching and see you in the next video.